There's so many techniques and tools that I've basically built my company around the idea of teaching people these skills, right? But in a nutshell, just to give you a couple examples, first, we have to understand that the human brain is wired for survival, right? The human brain is wired to survive. We came from cave people, cavemen, cavewomen, and our evolution physically and biologically has not kept pace with our evolution industrially and technologically. So we're basically cave people who live in a modern day. And we didn't evolve. Our emotions, our cognition, our psychology has not evolved at the same rate as all of our innovation has evolved. So as a result, we live in these beautiful homes connected to the internet 24 hours a day, with videos and movies that we can stream in on a TV, where we don't even have to, every phone call you make can now be face to face. There was a time when that was just science fiction, but now it's reality. So we as human beings, we are wired to always look for threats, no matter how good things get. So even though we have all these wonderful things, what are we still focused on? We're still focused on the things that we don't have, or we're focused on the things that we could lose, things that could be taken away. I could lose my job. I could lose my house. I could lose my car. My wife could leave me. My kids could get hurt at school, right? We start looking for threats in an ocean of blessings because we are wired for survival, when what we really should be doing is thinking about not how to survive, but how to thrive, how to take all the good things we have and make more good things out of those good things. It's the difference between an investment account and a savings account. When you put your money in savings, you're protecting it because you're essentially afraid of losing it. When you put your money into an investment account, you're putting it into a position where it will grow faster. It will work for you. You are willing to lose it in the effort and the opportunity that it might yield more. Human beings, the way that we are biologically wired, we think of our time as a savings account, when we should be thinking about our time as an investment account.
Is there an aspect of human nature that people tend to be most ignorant about, that we just don't even realize is a thing that's just in us?
So there's a lot of those. There's a number of places. And again, when we talk about people, we have to also layer on top of that culture, national identity, social values. I mean, it's not just a simple question about all humankind, because human beings break into different types of groups, right? Like boys and girls think about it differently. English speakers and non-English speakers think about it differently. Fathers and non-fathers think about it differently. So, but one of those areas that you're talking about, one place where human nature is always present and rarely leveraged, is an understanding that you can make other people feel good about themselves. And when you make someone else feel good about themselves, they feel good about you. Because most of the time, going back to our conversation about human beings wanting to thrive versus survive, because we are so survival mindset oriented, we're always looking for the person who makes us feel unsafe. We're always wary of the person who makes us feel threatened. So we're always apprehensive to meet strangers in case that stranger might be someone who's dangerous, someone who lies to us or steals from us, or that person who might steal my girlfriend or ruin my life, or who knows what, right? We are always looking for the threat because we are survival oriented. When you can understand that all people around you are survival oriented, everybody, doesn't matter the color of the skin, doesn't matter what language they speak, doesn't matter how much education they've had. Every human being that you meet right now is survival oriented, whether they're uber wealthy in Los Angeles or whether they're broke ass poor and homeless in Alabama. They're all survival oriented. So when you come in and you do nothing to threaten their survival, and you take specific intentional action to make them feel comfortable and make them feel validated and make them feel seen, what happens is they start to trust you. It's just as subconscious, just as unconscious as what you were saying about when there's a pregnant pause and you feel the need to speak. The same thing happens if somebody makes you feel good about you, you will naturally start to trust them. It's a term, you've heard the term falling in love. We have a term that we call falling into trust. Falling into trust happens when you like somebody and you don't really know why you like them, but you like them and you've liked them for long enough, and then all of a sudden you trust them and you don't really know why.
So that's your approach. It's not head on trying to get them to trust you. They have to fall into it in a way.
Correct. It's just, I mean, it's the parallel track to falling in love, right? We compare so much of espionage to dating because the game is almost the same. If you want to learn about how to build influence, all you need to do is learn about how to build relationships, because all influence is relationships with certain people who give you certain access to their power or their network. So we really do run this parallel model of how do you find a partner, fall in love, and get them to marry you. That's the same process for how you find a target, get them to share secrets, and then get them to commit to a long-term espionage relationship.
So right now we have a hot war in Europe with Russia and Ukraine, and then we have another one in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas. What other parts of the world should we be paying attention to that have the most risk of becoming a hot war as well? Maybe places of the world we're not even paying attention to that has the risk of being another hot conflict?
Yeah, so this is funny to me, Brian, right? It's funny to me because what you're saying is what the average person understands. There are only two hot wars. Do you know how many armed conflicts there are right now in the world? According to the Human Rights Institute, there are 144 hot war zones in the world.
Wow.
But you're an American, I'm guessing, right? Or you're Canadian, Brian?
American. Yep.
Yeah. American media dominates the English-speaking world. So because of that, all anybody really talks about is whatever makes the headlines in mainstream American news. So with 144 active hostile zones, the oldest of all the war zones is actually in Colombia. So in Colombia, there have been active, hot, armed conflicts with rebel groups, with the FARC, with various drug cartels. I mean, it's been going on for decades, multiple decades. So when you think about what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Israel, it's the most recent, it's the most high profile, it's probably got the most hardware in terms of, various military forces that are being employed. You've got naval forces in Ukraine, and you've got air, surface to air, and air to surface missiles happening in Israel. So you have all of that going on, but the world is always in conflict. Syria is still in conflict. Yemen is still in conflict. Places in Latin America, all across Africa are still in conflict. There are child soldiers still fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So there's all sorts of conflict going on all the time. But to your point, where is the next conflict? Where is the conflict going? I mean, right now, all roads clearly show that there is an increasing tension between the United States and China for what's called near peer competition or close peer competition to become the next global leader, the next global superpower. The United States has held that role for a long time. China has been slowly, well, some would say not so slowly, catching up to that title. And there's no way that you can look at the next 5 to 10 years and not be curious about what will conflict look like between the United States and China. In many ways, you're already seeing it. Not only do you see China running exercises over Taiwan, disregarding Taiwan's airspace, demonstrating blockades of Taiwanese water, not only do you see that at the same time that the United States is selling more weapons to Taiwan. The foreign aid package that was just passed by the House in the United States, if you've been keeping up with what's been going on there, that foreign aid package included money for Israel, included money for Ukraine, and included almost $9 billion in aid for the Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific is a catch-all term that basically means they have an opportunity to send Taiwan a bunch of money. because they're investing. The United States is starting to invest in the future conflict that they're hoping to avoid, but also have to realistically accept is going to come when China chooses to take aggressive military action on Taiwan. To go even deeper and nerd out a little bit more, China has been actively increasing their influence operations in Taiwan since October of last year. The elections that just happened in Taiwan in January were a clear demonstration of how much mainland China has already influenced Taiwan. Taiwan is basically a democracy. It has a president. It has a Congress, kind of like the United States. The president is anti-China. The Congress is pro-Chinese unification. So you can already see that just like the United States is divided between the president and the Congress, the same thing has happened now in Taiwan. And a big part of that is because China is so actively involved in influencing Taiwan, but that's not the kind of thing that makes American headlines. So instead, Americans are still worried about how many rockets came in from Hamas and how many shells does Ukraine need to keep bombing Russia.
If World War III would have happened, what would it look like? Would it look like World War II?
So it's funny, people ask me this question relatively frequently, and it's always surprising to me that people assume World War III hasn't already started. I would actually make the argument World War III has already started. We're in the middle of World War III right now. It's just that World War III looks nothing like World War II. World War II was about the Axis powers and the Allied powers fighting against each other in these giant unified military conglomerates, right? So it was the UK and the Australians and the Americans and the French all fighting against to push, Russia out of, to push the Nazis out of Poland. It was a threat of nuclear weapons. It was drills. It was bombing raids. That was World War II. Well, think about what World War I looked like compared to World War II. World War I looked completely different. It was trenches and gas warfare and hot air balloons instead of bombing raids. Well, World War I and World War II were less than 50 years apart. So why do we think that World War III and World War II would look anything like each other? It's already been more than 50 years since that war ended, right? So when you look into what's actually happening around the world in terms of military doctrine, strategic development, technological evolution since World War II, all the evidence points to the fact that World War III would be a war of what's called proxy conflict or proxy wars. Proxy conflict, proxy wars, means that wealthy benefactors essentially subsidize or pay smaller developing or third world countries to fight against each other. And then in that infighting, they can drive influence, they can infiltrate with some of their own espionage agents or spies. They can create havoc all over the world and always have plausible deniability because they're not the ones with boots on the ground. So when you think about what proxy war is, and then you think about what happened towards the end of the global war on terror. So think about it. The United States invades Iraq. The United States invades Afghanistan. That was basically the end of your traditional World War II style of invasion. When you start looking at what happened in Syria, what happened in Libya, what happened in Yemen, and you start looking at how conflict has progressed since the end of the global war on terror, you start to see that what you have is these proxy conflicts. Iran funds Hezbollah in Lebanon to fight Israel. The United States funds Ukraine to fight Russia. China funds, you name it, in Southeast Asia to fight any powers that be, from the Australians to the Americans to whatever else. So you have all these proxy conflicts happening now, essentially between democracy powers and authoritarian powers. So that's what World War III really is, in my opinion. It's a war between autocracy and democracy, and it's being played out in a battlefield of proxy conflict. All of the hot wars that you know of right now are proxy conflicts. Russia might be invading Ukraine, but Russia's being funded by China, North Korea, its own pocketbooks, the oligarchs, right? And then it's got lots of friends who are all warlords throughout Africa and Southeast Asia. And then who's fighting? Who's supporting Israel? Who's supporting Ukraine? It's all the democracies of the world. And that's why Israel's having such a hard time right now, because how can you claim to be a democracy when you're killing tens of thousands of non-combatants in what is essentially like a human rights atrocity? It's a very difficult war to play.
Something that came to my mind when you were talking is, so World War II, right? It was 39 to 45, and it was like 6 years. So do you think that this whole World War III, the proxies, the proxy war, do you think this could stretch out for maybe like a 10 to 15 year period of all these proxy wars happening?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's actually really astute of you, Brian, because if you look at how war evolves, you start to see how different the lengths of war take. Because the length of a war in many ways dictates the commitment of the fighters. So World War II was much longer than World War I, and the global war on terrorism was almost 20 years long, and that's assuming that you think the global war on terror is over, right? So you can see how the lifespan of these conflicts is being drawn out more and more. So if you consider proxy wars to have started essentially in Syria, then you're looking back to 2012, 2013, when those really started, if that's when you're thinking about the start date. So it's not unreasonable to compare it to the global war on terror, which lasted 20 years. That would mean that from 2012 to essentially 2032 is 20 years of proxy conflict, of what might be called World War III. Well, if you look at what economists are estimating that the United States will no longer be the only superpower by 2032 and 2033. So that puts us right on schedule for essentially what could be the end of a World War III or an extended proxy war. So that the purpose of a proxy war, again, the purpose of what's known as an intrastate war. Intrastate is when one sovereign nation invades another sovereign nation. The purpose of an intrastate war is to radically destroy both economy and industry in your opponent. The strategy behind a proxy war is to preserve the economy and preserve the industry of your opponent so that when you conquer them, you can immediately make their industry and their economy work for you. That's the purpose of a proxy conflict. The fantastic example was in Libya, right? In Libya, you didn't see these two opposing forces destroying each other. What you saw was that they were taking great care not to damage the local economy or the local industry, because they knew that one day one of the two would win. And whoever won, the faster they could get an ROI from the land that they just conquered, the better off they would be. In many ways, this goes all the way back to what it was like in the Dark Ages, when France and Portugal and Spain were fighting with the British, and everybody was trying to take new land. What they wanted was to win a very short, decisive battle that only killed knights and soldiers, so they could immediately get the benefit of all the farmers and the merchants when they took over the territory. What we learned coming out of World War II is that nuclear weapons destroy countries and destroy industry. So the United States had to rebuild Japan. They had to help rebuild Germany. It took, 5 to 10 years before those countries were back into a position where they could be productive. Nobody wants to do that in the current era, and that's another reason proxy war is so viable.
Freedom! So fresh, son. Freedom!